everyone, and welcome to our Cambridge Early Years webinar. I'm Bridget McHugh from Cambridge University Press and Assessment. And today's speakers you will see on screen is our Early Years author, Philippa Hines, and our Senior Research Associate, Chris Jellis. So yes, as a kind of overall reminder, this webinar will provide you with practical tips for measuring learner progress. It includes how and when to observe early years learners and how to use these observations to really ensure that children have the best learning experience. We'll also be exploring our digital assessment tool, Cambridge Early Years Check Together, and Chris is here with us today to talk about that. I'm going to hand over to Philippa to begin our webinar today.
Thank you, Bridget. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where in the world you are joining us from. Welcome to our webinar, Measuring Learner Progress in the Early Years Classroom. My name is Philippa, and I'll be taking you through today. Let's have a look at what we will be covering today then. As Bridget said, we will be looking at the why, the how, and the when to observe, and looking at how to measure your children's progress. Chris will talk us through the Cambridge Early Years Check Together as an additional tool as well. We'll look at what it is that you need to know when you're making your observations and assessments, the importance of working with parents, and of course the observation cycle. And if we have time, we'll be doing some observation and case studies. But throughout today's webinar, you'll be able to apply the knowledge that you're gaining as we go through. So you'll see what I mean shortly. So why do we observe then? Well, of course, we need to know more, don't we? Like these children in the picture, we need to find out more. We need to find out where the children are in their learning and development, who they are, and what it is that they like. They help us to plan and respond to the children's interests and needs, whether that's during play or planning what to do next. It can help to plan your environment and your teaching, just like you've said in our poll. So you could be providing more differentiation for certain children or adapting your teaching to suit other individual children. So you might be going slower or providing more challenge. We need to ensure that children are progressing as expected for their age and stage, and to ensure that our teaching is at an appropriate level. And of course, it will aid our partnership working with our parents and other professionals. So it might be that a child has found a spider in the garden today, and the child was so excited about it that you want to tell the parents all about this lovely moment. But does this happen at home? Is the child finding spiders at home? Those are the kinds of things that you can find out. Or perhaps it is that you need to build on a child's self-confidence, and you can work with the parents with that. So throughout today's webinar, I want you to be able to link what I'm talking about, the theory, to your practice. So for now, all I want you to do is just to think of a child. Just keep that child in your mind. There's always one child that pops into our head, isn't there, when we're thinking about our settings? Pick that one. Just keep it in your mind. And now we're just going to park that for a moment and look at how to observe. Of course, there are many ways to observe, and you need to find a way that is suitable for you, because it must work for you and your school and perhaps even your country. So, of course, you're going to be watching the children all the time. That's part of your job every day, and talking to them. We can learn so much through our interactions with the children and by playing with them. It might be that you write down some notes as you are watching and listening, or it might be that you write up some more formal written observations later on at the end of the day or the end of the week. Many settings use different types of rubrics or checklists, and that's absolutely fine. But playing with the children is where you will find out so much, And sometimes it's just great to be involved with the children and really be able to assess where they're at. Other times, you'll want to take a step back and just watch what's going on, watch and listen from a distance and be able to record that. So going back to your child then, how do you currently support your child with your observation and assessment process? There's no need to answer this. You don't need to put anything in the chat box unless you particularly want to. But just have a think. I want you to be able to reflect on it. Make some notes for yourself if you want to. How are you currently supporting this child that you thought of? Okay, so let's have a look at when to observe them. Now, you will know that this is a continual process. You will be doing this all day, every day, and including things like your daily routines. So you'll be a dab hand at observations already. But there are times where children will demonstrate their true knowledge, understanding, and skills. And this is when they are playing. You really get a great sense of assessment when they are playing. Other times, you'll be engaged with the children and supporting their play and learning. You might be encouraging them to try new things or take on new challenges. It might be that you've got the clay out for the first time today, and so you're going to sit with the children, talk to them about it, and demonstrate how to use it and how to maybe make some shapes or objects. You'll also need to be able to assess children's development and ensure that they are learning new skills, knowledge, and concepts. So you'll need to provide those activities and opportunities for children to learn, embed, and recall their learning. And this could be through scientific experiments, for instance. You'll also need to include those routines that I spoke about and those transitions that children go through every day, coming into school, tidying up, getting ready for lunch or going into a different room. All those kinds of things you need to observe and be aware of how they affect a child. But also think about the changes that they are experiencing at home. Have they recently moved house, or is there a new sibling? You need to know those things so you can see if they are affecting the child and how you can support them more. Cambridge Early Years curriculum offers some teaching resources, which are books full of activities linked to learning themes and learning statements. Within these activities are listen and observe sections, so you're able to carry out the activity and be aware of what to look for whilst you are carrying it out. So they're really good for you. And if you are a Cambridge Early Years provider, you will have access to our amazing school support hub. It has so much information on there and guidance, but particularly around observational assessment. You can find lots of help and support on the school support hub. So you've thought about your child and with your observations and how you support them with your observations and assessments. And now that we have looked at the why, the how, and the when to observe, could you make some different observations or use some different assessment methods? No need to answer me in the chat, you don't have to. Just make a note yourself. Have a moment to reflect and think. Perhaps there's something else that you've thought, I could be doing that. Now let's move on to how to measure children's progress. Again, there are a range of ways and you need to find something that's suitable for you and your school because you need to be able to understand it and use it effectively. So many schools will create rubrics against learning statements or just creating their own checklist. That's absolutely fine. But you can play with the children as well and see if they understand or have acquired the knowledge or skill that you have been teaching them. So maybe yesterday you were going through the letter A, and today you want to see if they can recall that learning and it's embedded in them. So maybe you're playing in the home area, the role play kitchen, and there's a recipe book or a recipe card, Can they find the letter A in print? Do they know what foods begin with the letter A? Or maybe you're playing with some animals. Can they see which animals have A in their names? You need to have really good communication, so talk to your team. Has anyone seen a skill in action? Or if you see something, then report it yourself to the rest of your team. And of course, talk to the parents. What do they know? We also have our Cambridge Early Years Check Together tool. And I'm going to hand you over now to Chris, who's going to talk you through all of our Cambridge Early Years Check Together.
Thank you, Philippa. Thank you. So the Early Years Check Together assessment is a digital assessment, and it's designed to add to all the observational assessment that goes on in the classroom that Philippa's been talking about. And the idea is that the assessment's carried out when the learner starts in the school in the year, and then just before the end of the year, and then we can measure a child's progress from the start of the year to the end of the year. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. So how does it work? Well, the teacher and the learner would sit together quietly somewhere with a computer. It needs to be quiet and out of the way because otherwise children try and help. And that's not very helpful if you're trying to find out what one child knows. The computer asks questions and the learner responds by pointing or saying the answer. The teacher then marks the answer right or wrong. If the learner's getting questions right, then they're asked further questions. If they start getting them wrong, then the computer automatically moves to a new section and starts again with easier questions. If we can move on, please, Philippa. So the assessment tests literacy, numeracy, and it also has a personal, social, and emotional development part too. Now, here's some examples of some literacy questions. The one on the left is one of the first ones we do. And it's important because before we even learn to read or write, we need to know what those things look like. So very small children maybe copy their parents or copy their siblings. You know, they hold a book, they hold a pencil. When you ask them what they're doing, they say, oh, I'm reading or I'm writing, because they have to know that that's what you do when you're doing those things. So the first thing we do is, can you point to someone who is reading? And literally, we just want them to point to one of those pictures and point to someone who's reading. Then we might say, okay, can you point to someone who's writing? And we follow that up with, on another screen, can you point to a letter or a word or a sentence? And it gradually works up through their understanding of what it means to read and write. On the right-hand side, we also want to know whether children know their letters. Some children start school not knowing no letters at all. Some children know some, and some children know quite a lot. So we put a letter up on the screen and say, what letter is this? And it doesn't matter whether they say A or whether they say A. What we want to know is whether they recognize that shape and whether it means something to them. And obviously some letters will be more common than others. So they might know A, they might know I, they might know S, but they probably won't know the letter Y or Q or J, which are more uncommon, unless they happen to be common in their name or in the language they might speak at home. So if we can move on then, Philippa. Something else that we do is we might want to see if the learner can count. And the way that we do that, we could do it with a number line, but what we decided to do is to have a bug, and we show them the bug and we say, how many spots are on its back? And then the teacher can watch the learner count, and you can learn an awful lot by watching what the child does. Are they confident? Are they daunted by the task? If they start to count it, do they visit each spot only once? Or are they unsure which spots they've already counted? Some children actually just count in a circle because they don't know that they need to stop. And counting's very difficult anyway. You need to know your numbers in order. And you need to know that the last number you mention is also the number of all the items you've just counted. Sometimes children aren't that secure in that, and they'll go 1, 3, 4, 5. And you can see that as a teacher, you can see them do that, and you can understand a little bit about some of the problems that you might have. And also, if you try and get them to count to too many numbers, then they might not know the numbers above about 5 or 6. That's very common as well. On the right-hand side, we have a question which is actually a little bit harder. And a child would only see this if they'd shown that they could count and that sort of thing first. We say there are 3 bugs on a leaf. If one flew away, how many would be left? And when I first saw this, I thought, why are we doing subtraction before we do addition? But then I realized that it's much more easy for a child to cover up one of those bugs with their hand and just count what's left than imagine a bug that appears on the leaf. And in fact, when we used to do this assessment, when we first started doing it, the bugs were much bigger. We wanted to make them easy to count. And when we said, oh, imagine another bug on the leaf, some children say, well, there isn't room for another bug on the leaf, so I can't do that. So children think in funny ways sometimes, and we have to try and understand what they're thinking and try and understand what the problems that they might have when they're thinking about some of these problems. Okay, if we can move on then, Philippa. So here's an example of the personal, social and emotional development, or PSED questions. And the teacher wouldn't do this when they're sitting with the child. You'd normally do that once the child had settled into the classroom and you could watch them with other children or carrying out activities. And you can see there we've got a couple of headings there: making relationships in the classroom, self-confidence and self-awareness. And for each of those, there's a little phrase, so joins in activities and conversations. And you can mark them: never, rarely, sometimes, often, or always. And you can do this assessment at the start and the end of the year as well. And you can see how much more they've settled in at the end of the year compared with the start of the year. Can we move on, please? Okay, so check together can be used twice per year. So we do it shortly after the learner starts and again at the end of the year. And the reports that you get back will show the progress the child has made during the year. Of course, it won't be the only evidence you have, because there'll be lots of observational evidence as well, but it will add to the evidence that you have to make your decisions about how to teach children and how to differentiate your learning. So if we can move on to the next one, the main report looks like this. The arrows split into start of year and end of year, and the little blue bar shows where the learner was at the start of the year and again at the end of the year. And you can see the progress the learner's made by the distance between the 2 bars. And each bar is associated with a short ability statement. So the one next to the blue bar on the left says, is starting to development and understanding of basically literacy concepts, recognizes when someone is reading or writing, and has an emerging awareness of the alphabet. And the ones up the top are much more complicated. So you can see the progress the child has made in literacy, in maths, and in personal, social, and emotional development over the time that they were in school with you. Can we move on to the next slide, please, Philippa? Okay, the second report that you get is what we call the question level report. And this report shows every question the learner was asked and when they got it right or wrong. If they got it right, the box is coloured green, and it's red if they got it wrong. And it compares what the learner knew at the start of the year with what they knew at the end of the year. So at the start of the year, this learner could point to a circle, a square, and a star, but they couldn't point to a triangle or a rectangle or a hexagon. So when we tested them again at the end of the year, they could point to the circle, the square, and the star, and they also knew a triangle and a rectangle, but they didn't see the hexagon. They couldn't point to the hexagon. And the other thing, I think at the beginning I said that it only moves on to harder questions if you're getting things right. So just below, it's got 3D shapes there. And At the beginning of the year, they weren't offered those 3D shapes because they'd shown that they weren't really ready for those. But we asked those at the end of the year. And at the end of the year, the child could point to a pyramid, a cylinder, but couldn't point to a cube or a sphere. So for each child, you can see exactly what they knew, their letters, their numbers, the shapes, all these different things. And that will be really helpful for you in terms of differentiation, planning, put them into table groups, however you do these things in your classroom, and will enable you to use that information. And then you can augment it with all the other things that Philippa's talking about. So that was a very quick run through what Check Together does. But of course, a computer assessment can't do everything, which is why you need to observe learners as well. And with that, I'll hand back to Philippa.
Thank you, Chris. That was very interesting. So I hope you got lots from that. So we're going to pop back to our child now, excuse me, and think about if you are familiar with what stage of development they are currently at. Are you aware of all of their 6 areas of learning? No need to pop this in the chat box, just have a think. Are you aware of only perhaps 3 areas? So maybe you think, okay, well, I know then I need to focus on some other areas of learning to ensure that I know all about this child, I know them holistically. Well, let's take a look at what it is that you need to know, ready to make your observations and assessments. Now, you do need to have a good grasp of child development and know the key milestones. And if you are a new teacher, I appreciate you're not going to know everything, and that's absolutely fine. That's why you have a whole team behind you as well, so you can ask them for support and guidance. But just knowing those key milestones, even things like when they should walk or speak in sentences or perhaps be able to count, things that we would expect certain ages to be able to achieve. We know that every child develops at different rates, and that's absolutely fine. But just so you know, if you're thinking, oh, this child might need extra support or is progressing really well. So you need to get to know the child, who they are, what it is that they like or dislike. What about their family life and experiences? Do you know who they live with and what they get up to of a weekend? Now, if we take this picture, for instance, so if you gave me this picture and said, can you tell me about this child from a picture? I would say, well, I think it's probably safe to say that the child likes animals. So that might be an area that I would focus on and progress with. I can see that the child's sitting under a table. So I would think that perhaps the child likes to feel enclosed. And so I might build a den or have an enclosed space and see if they use that within the school or not. Now, there's only one child in the picture, and we don't know if there's another child just out of the picture shot. So I wouldn't be able to say if they liked playing alone or not, but it might be something to observe. Excuse me. So you need to know the observation process and cycle, and thinking about when children are engaged, when they're demonstrating that true knowledge through understanding and play, when they're trying something new or different, and remembering those different types of play to observe, including your routines, as we spoke about earlier. Have that clear communication with your team and the parents. That is really important, especially when children start. And then throughout a child's time with you, building on that learning and being aware of any changes that may be happening at home. Working with your team through transitions and talking to new teachers ready for the child's next stage in their educational journey. So as I've said, working with parents is really important, and that is because the parents are the child's primary educator, and we must remember that. So I want you to take a moment to think about what I've been talking about and think about your own practice. Now, this is where you can join in the chat box. So I'm going to give you some questions, And I'd like you to send me your ideas so I can see what it is that you're doing, and so can everyone else, and we can share some ideas. So take a moment. How do you share information with parents? How do you involve parents in their child's learning? What do you do with parental information? And what else could you do? So just pop down some ideas in the chat box for us, and let's see what it is that you're doing in your settings. So how do you share that information with parents? How do you involve them in their child's learning? And what do you do with any information that the parents give you? Anyone like to share their ideas? Report cards, parent-teacher meetings, coffee mornings, that's great. Yes, parents do like to talk, don't they? So you listen and take into account your goals, emails, progress picnics. Oh, they sound fun. I like that. Activities, meetings, feedback. That's great that you're all managing to talk to your parents. Homework, Google Classroom, an open house. That sounds great. Getting the parents to come inside. Parent-teacher conferences, newsletters, good. Stay and play. Oh, I love that. That's really great. Coffee mornings, again, online software. So there are so many ideas here coming through, and it's great that you're all using different mediums, because not everyone likes to read an email. Not everyone likes to talk. So it's good that you can use different tools to access each parent. Communication books. Oh, WhatsApp, great. A visit at home. That sounds fantastic. I like that. So you've all said that you're talking to your parents, you have reports and meetings. Are you sending them home ideas to try at home, perhaps whether that's weekly, monthly, termly? Our teacher resources books that I mentioned earlier has ideas for parents to try at home that are linked to the theme and to the learning statement. So it really helps to carry on the child's learning into the home environment. There are letters already in the teacher resource of books, and you just need to simply edit those to your needs. Are you seeking out parents of children with higher needs? Perhaps you really should be. And what about, are parents able to share their photos or videos with you? Because that would be really nice to see a child in their home environment or on an experience with their parents. What about, I may have missed it because these are flying through, so thank you so much, but do you have a toy library or a book library where children can borrow resources from your school? And then thinking about the information from the parents then, when a child starts, it's really important that we get lots of information from that parent. What are the child's interests? What do they dislike? What's their routine like? So you know you can watch for any moments of perhaps when they're feeling tired or sad. And then throughout the child's time with you, sharing that progress, encouraging the parents to share the child's progress with you, and telling you of their child's new interests and their experiences. And of course, all of this information you can use for your planning. So planning those interactions with the children, planning your activities, and you can really then bring everything together. And just remember that the child is at the center of everything that we do. So if we pull it all together, all the different strands, then the outcome for the child will be even greater. So thank you so much for that. I'd love to keep talking with you about it, but unfortunately I need to move on because we've got so much to get through today. So have you discovered something new that you could use? No need to answer me for this one. This is your reflective moment. What else could you do to help the child's progress? Thinking about those observations and assessments. And remembering that the child is at the centre of everything that we do. Okay, so this is our Cambridge observation cycle. And at the top, you can see discover. And so this is where you'll be observing a child, and perhaps you found something new, maybe a new interest or a skill, or they've achieved a new milestone. But also where you may discover that perhaps there is a learning need or delay with the child. So then you need to decide what you're going to do next. Have a think about how you can support this child in their progress. And then in the do, you'll be looking at and implementing your action plan from your decide phase. So that might be right now and being able to build and extend on children's learning. As Chris said, children struggle with counting in the very beginning. So perhaps you can hear that a child is missing numerals as they're counting. So what do? Well, you go in and help them, don't you? You go and play with them and support them and encourage them and count with them. Or perhaps you might think, okay, well, tomorrow we need to make sure that we've got some more counting things available. So whether that's certain resources or playing games with the child. Or it might be that you can plan your teaching. And so you might think of a new theme that you can do next week or next month. On the record and report side, so you will record according to your need, but you'll also need to talk to your team, the parents, perhaps any other professionals if you've noticed a need or a delay, and maybe even a previous teacher if you feel that if you wanted to ask if the previous teacher noticed anything. Now, I appreciate that was quite fast to go through all of that, but there is lots of professional development available for you to book onto. So there's a link being shared now in the chat box for you where you can access further training and information around observations. What I really want to highlight to you is that you should be making a difference through your observations and assessments. They are really important. And I was really pleased to see that at the beginning, hardly anyone said because we have to do observations and assessments. And actually, yeah, we do have to. So you're not wrong in your answer, but it's not the main reason why we do them. And so I hope that you know the true value of your observations and assessments. So if we have a moment, then we can at least try and get through one of these and where we can link your practice, well, just practice the theory with these simple case studies. So I want you to think about how you can support children's development and progress. So if we take case study 1, a child is playing with some blocks, trying to build a car, but it keeps collapsing. What are you going to do next to support children's progress? Please do put your comments in the chat box for me so that we can all see. And I can see that you are there. What do you think you could do to help that child? They're probably getting a little bit frustrated. They just want to build a car. What could you do to help them? Give some more guidelines and let her do it again. Yep, encourage them. Absolutely. Point on where we should try and focus. Motivate the child. Oh, I love that. Yep, help them. Try again. Exactly that. Encourage them. Encourage them to reflect, as you've said. Perhaps you need to offer some ideas because they've run out of ideas. But I'm glad to see that you're all going to join them and use those open-ended questions as well. Fantastic. Okay. I know you're all pulling them in, but we've not got long. So let's see if we can do another one. So at drop-off, a parent reports that at the weekend, the family went to a wedding. What are you going to do next to support that child's progress? What do you think you could do with that? We've just talked a lot about working with parents, haven't we? At drop-off, a parent reports that at the weekend, the family went to a wedding. Ask about their experience. Yes, exactly that. Draw me a picture. Fantastic. Have a weekend news. Oh, I like that. Ask them to draw what they say. Fantastic. Yes, you're all getting involved with this. It's brilliant. It's circle time. Ask questions. Brilliant. Yes, exactly that. That's the first thing you're going to do, isn't it? Is talk to the child. Have you got any other additional resources that you could perhaps use a book available, or you could look things up on the internet. But yeah, excellent. You're all saying the right thing. And then after that, you could perhaps source some additional resources, couldn't you? To make perhaps a wedding role play. All right, let's see if we've got time for one more then, everyone. A group of children often role play outside, frequently being builders in the sand pit. What do you do next to support the children's progress? What could you do now? A group of children often role play outside, frequently being builders in the sand pit. What would you do next to support those children? Provide new equipment. Lovely. Thank you, Pamela. Are there any more ideas just before we have to close this one? Was I want to take time for your questions. Join them, role play. Yeah, let them explore, guide them or play with them. Brilliant. Give them a sand tray, trace some letters. Ooh, move on to other professions. Nice. Ask questions, provide some tools. Fantastic. Brilliant. Yes, I would be doing all of that. Use construction theme. Brilliant. So firstly, I'd be thinking about those diggers and dumpers, putting those in the sand, any large shovels, hats, high-vis jackets, or whatever the builders might wear in your country, in your region. Maybe you're lucky enough to have a workshop area with real wood, and so you could start using that and doing some adult-led activities and guided play around that. And you've said make a builder's area, use tools and dressing up, tape measures, pencils, paper, large construction bricks. Brilliant. And it looks like, oh, and there we go. Thank you so much for your input. I've now got to hand over to Bridget, but well done, everyone. You have done fantastic, and it's great to see that you're all able to use those observations and put them into practice. So do keep doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa, and thank you, Chris, and thank you all for some brilliant ideas that I hope will help each other as well with this, as well as Philippa and Chris's tips and guidance. So it's now time for our, well, in a few minutes it'll be time for our Q&A. So have a think if you want any questions, and if you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. But in the next couple of minutes, I'm just going to run through a few things. So as a reminder, Cambridge Early Years is now this new first stage on the Cambridge pathway for learners aged 3 to 6 years old. And a few of you have asked this already in the chat. So we're going to put a link in the chat now so you can find out more about Cambridge Early Years. So when Philippa's been talking about the resources and when Chris has been talking about the Check Together, it's all part of this new programme. Which is why we're coming here and doing webinars as well this year on a range of different exciting and useful early years topics. And alongside this being a new part of the Cambridge pathway, if you could just pop to the next slide, Philippa, thank you. I can see a few of you have asked questions about professional development as well. And we do have a range of professional development opportunities available. So I think if you scan this QR code, you can access our professional development calendar and explore some of our early years courses. So we have an excellent Getting to Know Cambridge Early Years webinar, which covers a bit of an overview of the whole programme, and that's on the 15th and 16th of May, which we recommend attending to find out more. And we will be very soon offering professional development support for our Cambridge Early Years resources with what's called Preparing to Teach courses, which are available in an online format, but also kind of a blended format where you can speak to the trainer, and there is a face-to-face option as well if there's enough interest in this. So yes, we'll pop a link in the chat on Preparing to Teach as well, which will really help you with learning how to work with the Cambridge Early Years resources. So if you just go on to the next slide, Philippa, if that's okay. Yeah, so some of the things that Philippa and Chris have been talking about today. So we've got so much more support for monitoring learner progress as part of Cambridge Early Years. So On our school support hub, which you can see on the left of the screen, this is available for registered Cambridge Early Years centres. You'll find lots of helpful training guidance, like you can see on the left. And then our resources on the right, such as our teaching resources, and we also have learners books. So these are available to purchase whether you're a Cambridge Early Years registered centre or not. But if you're a Cambridge registered Early Years centre, you actually get our teaching resource with lesson plans and downloadables all for free. So these are available to buy as well to support you with teaching Cambridge Early Years. And we have some of these observational assessment features within this to really support when you're assessing. So we have what's called the listen and observe, where you can work with the tips for working with children on one-to-one basis and moving the progress on towards the learning statements too. So yes, I think we're posting a link to look inside some of our resources as well in the chat, which you'll be able to see. So yeah, that just leaves me to say, have a good day wherever you are. Thank you again on behalf of Cambridge University Press and Assessment, and thank you again to Philippa and Chris. So goodbye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.